Well, let me go back a second. So healthcare is where it is now because, in part, we don't know how to. Physicians don't know how to talk with administrators. Administrators don't know how to talk with physicians, and not to mention all the other departments in the hospital. And with like the Chris Voss method, or if you want to call it the Black Swan communications method, or I think before that it was the Sandler method, which is still used. And then Sandler, one of his students was Jim Camp,
Jim Camp.
right? And then
I
Chris
was going to
Voss,
say the Jim Camp method.
right? Exactly.
Start
Yeah.
with an O. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Chris Voss is a big fan of Jim Camp, so
Yes.
it kind of went from one name to another. But it's fascinating because those sales methods really are also a way to really, if used well and wisely, are great for being able to understand who you're talking with, understand their point of view, and being able to then, and then you can help each other basically see the bigger picture and kind of, how it impacts not just your side, but then now you understand how it impacts their side. And then you can come to a conclusion where, okay, well, how can we both really get what we want? How can we help the system as a whole improve without tying our own egos into it? Because at that point too, once you've been heard, you don't feel like you're threatened, right? Camilo understands how Sam feels, so then Sam doesn't feel threatened by Camilo about, that Camilo is just doing it for his own well-being, and he doesn't care what what Sam's needs are. So, with that, what is the big deal with empathy, and how will it help me get people to change what they do?
Well, as you know, I'm fairly adept to the empathy method of looking at conversations within people. Chris Voss is kind of the guru at that. And for those who are listening who may not know who Chris is, Chris used to be an FBI hostage negotiator years ago, and I met him briefly. I don't think he remembers that, but I do, because it was another time in my life. I met him briefly in Quantico many years ago. I happened to have been a tactical medical officer for a police department on a part-time basis, and we went to a course that we were invited, and he just happened to popped in, and I didn't make too much of it. And then years later, he published his book, Never Split the Difference, which it's really transformative because it crystallizes Jim Camp's ideas and all of the other ideas about using empathy, what Chris Voss calls tactical empathy, which is a brilliant term in my opinion. I think this is exactly what it is the use of empathy in a tactical way. And empathy by that is meant really, empathy is a misunderstood concept. And it's a concept that is not widely or commonly taught. And I'm going to circle back to that in a second. But empathy is not sympathy. It's not just compassion for others, or I feel you, or I have your feelings, or anything of that sort. It's really about understanding, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, even if you disagree with them. You don't have to agree with anybody. You just have to make sure that they feel understood, because that is the path to behavioral change. And the FBI hostage negotiators have Gary Nessner and some of that other group that have written quite a bit about it, have what is known as the behavioral staircase model, where they start with active listening, rapport, empathy. And the idea is to move that ball all the way to behavioral change, to transform the behavior of others. And I think this is where empathy plays a big role, because whether we like it or not, I think that every one of us wants to be understood. I think that every one of us wants to be regarded. That the worst, and I say this all the time to people, the worst place to be emotionally, in my view, is when you feel that you're being taken for granted, when you don't matter. And that's what you need to avoid in any conversation. And this is where empathy comes very handy, because you essentially empower the other person without agreeing with them. You don't have to agree with them. This is the beauty of it. There's a misunderstanding. You have to agree. You don't have to agree with them. You just have to empower them to say their piece, to be heard, to be understood. And the interesting thing about it that I have found, both personally and through experience with others, is that how many times, for those of you listening, how many times do you think of something and you say it? And the moment you say it, you say to yourself, well, that sounded better in my head. And, well, this is where you want the people to get to, the people with whom you disagree. You want to get them to the point where they say something, they state their case, and they say, and the moment they say it and it's out there, all of a sudden says, well, that didn't make as much sense as I thought it would. And then you can then piggyback into empathy, critical thinking, clarity of thought, and then begin to transform the conversation into a collaborative rather than an antagonistic approach. And the reason I got interested in this when I read Never Split the Difference is because it occurred to me that we as physicians are not systematically educated on this kind of tactic. And I wrote about it. I wrote a book chapter for one of Chris's books, Strategic Conversations. And I wrote about it because it was very transformative for me. We are educated in medicine to debate, not to negotiate. And the emphasis of debate is essentially verbal jujitsu. You are going to win the argument by virtue of you have the better argument and you want to come on top versus the opponent of the argument. It's a clinical argument, it's an administrative argument, whatever it is, as opposed to negotiating a solution that works at all levels and under all circumstances.